What's up everyone, it's a Knife Style here, and today I'm going to be doing my full review on the American Blade Works Model 1 V6. And if you're not familiar with the concept and the history behind this knife, what they have done at American Blade Works is they have taken one knife and basically gone through 6 different versions of it, improving it over those different versions. And that's something that we don't see with a lot of different knife companies. You know, Spyderco, they do like constant quality control or constant quality improvement, but I mean, they still have knives with major flaws that they just haven't even addressed, so I don't really count them on it. And then some companies like Hogue, they have improved the Deca over time, but it's not really major improvements like you see on this. So there isn't really many companies doing things that are similar to this, and so that is why I think it's really cool. I actually really like that idea because it seems like a lot of companies, they'll make a knife and then they'll just be like, oh yeah, we'll fix that problem in the 2.0 version of that knife, or maybe we'll just make a completely different knife and fix the problem there. A lot of companies never are like, oh wow, that pocket clip has way too tight a retention, let's fix that on the future models, or let's fix that on the next batch. And so I really like that mentality. I think it's cool because it shows that he wants to make, or Michael Martin, the man behind this company, he wants to make a better knife. He wants to make the best product he can, and I really like that, and I can really support that. So let's get a, I guess we'll do a size comparison. This is overall just kind of an average EDC knife. One size that, or I'd say it's a full size EDC knife. I haven't really ever needed a bigger knife when carrying this, but here it is compared to the LUDT. They're very similar in overall size and blade length and things like that. And so I plan on doing a battle of the blades between these two, because even though one's an auto, one's a manual, they are more similar than you think. So I think that would be a fun video. And I've had this knife for probably, I got it at Blade Show, so I guess we're closing in on 2 months, and there's probably been, I've carried it for like 2 weeks straight, and I would say I carried it in 3 weeks in total, and I've gotten about 3 to 4 sharpenings on this knife, so I feel like I have definitely enough use on this to do my full review. Let's talk about the anatomy, what this knife is built up of, the materials, all that kind of stuff. So we got a 20 CV drop point stonewash blade. I think this is like a bead blast and then a stonewash on there. And we have a black micarta handle scale. This also comes in G10. They have carbon fiber. I think it's a marbled carbon fiber, and they have brown micarta, and they also have different colors of G10. The prices will vary based on the handle material, but we have a tip up right-handed, left-handed titanium milled pocket clip. It's a flipper tab deployment. It's a liner lock running on bearings, made in the USA by American Blade Works for about, I got this for $185, and I think that was a special like Blade Show price, and so they just switched to 20 CV. They used to use S35VN. So now I think it's going to be about $200 if I'm correct about that. The name wasn't Michael Martin on the YouTube comment, but someone that sounded like they worked for the company commented on my first impressions video. So I'd suggest looking at that comment. They left a bunch of information on there, which was very useful. So yeah, that's a cool thing to check out. And that's all I got for the anatomy of it. Let's move on to the look. So looks, I'm really a fan of how this knife looks. I like this bead blast stonewash finish. Not my favorite with wear over time, and sometimes like it really shows wear easy, like when you're cutting stuff with it. Just that's kind of the nature of a bead blasted finish, but I do think it looks really good just like this. And also the black micarta, I'm a big fan of black micarta. It's probably one of my favorite handle materials. I like how it shows character. It kind of looks old and rugged, and also it does darken a little bit with like the sweat of your hands, but I think it's not super extreme. You know, sometimes like brown micarta, when it's really patinaed, it looks really good, but when it's just barely patinaed a little bit, I'm not a fan of how it looks. But yeah, I really like how this knife just looks in general. I think it looks great. Also, the American Blade Works logo, I like how I prefer when things are like milled into the blade or hardware or the handle scale rather than like a laser etch. Same with this like stamped out steel logoing. I think that looks good just because it's not another color to add into the mix of all these. I guess I'm kind of picky, but yeah, I do think this knife overall is a good looking knife. Let's talk about the blade. So we got a 20 CV blade, just switched to it. One thing I like about this knife is the edge geometry. So this thing is sharpened at 15 degrees per side. And as you can see, that bevel is pretty small. And let's get a measurement on this. Let me hold this closer to me so I can see better. All right, so I just measured 14 thousandths. I'm gonna make sure my calipers are tuned because I've measured thicker than that, but okay, actually no, it's 15 thousandths behind the edge at that thin degree per side. And up here we're looking 17 thousandths, and then it thickens up significantly at the tip at about 28 thousandths at the tip. So I'll just call it 15 thousandths behind the edge towards this main flat area, and then about 28 thousandths at the tip. And that is really good. I'm a really big fan of that. And I'm just glad to see another knife company out there, a new knife company, grinding their knives thin. You know, I've had knives recently, mainly this ProTech and this Hinder. These are all some of my most recent knives. And these, I mean, they're about 20 thousandths behind the edge. This one's about 25 thousandths. But it was just refreshing to carry a knife that is super thin behind the edge. A knife that I don't have to keep razor sharp to use. I can just kind of use it. Even if it's kind of catching on paper, I can still cut cardboard fine with it, cardboard and tape. Because it's just so thin behind the edge, it just passes through materials very easy. So I'm a big fan of people grinding their knives thin. So shout out to American Blade Works. They did a great job with that. Now, where we run into issues with this blade, I'll go ahead and get these knives out here because these are all in 20 CV. This one might be M390. Oh no, it's also 20 CV. So I've 3 of my past 4 knives that I've bought, all in 20 CV, so I've had a healthy dose of it. I don't really like buying knives in 20 CV because the heat treat is kind of variable, but I've been able to compare all 3 of these in my recent sharpenings, and this one has felt the worst when sharpening. I would say Hinder feels the best, ProTech second best, which this was below average, I would say, and this isn't very good. If you guys have ever sharpened a soft steel, it is not very enjoyable to sharpen. This is a knife that I felt like I was just holding my angle super good the whole time, really making sure I was focused on my deburring strokes, and it just never felt like it would deburr. It was almost like I removed the burr on both sides so much that it was just a burr down the middle of the edge. And that is something that happens fairly frequently with these soft steels. And so you have a couple different options. One of them being just strop it off and kind of hold a little bit of a higher angle when you strop, which I don't really like doing. But the other one would be kind of just slightly running it over the edge of the stone when you are stropping it, and that kind of just aiding in the deburr. Sorry about that, I had to answer a call. So with deburring, or you will have to run the edge of the knife on the top of the stone just very lightly to almost knock off that burr, and then you kind of just dulge your knife slightly there, so then you do very light deburring strokes on the knife to kind of reform that apex, and then you move on to the strop. That's how you keep a good toothy edge if you have a steel that is just super soft. And so that's why I had to do, and I also had to just pretty much, I honestly, the last time I sharpened this, I did not want to go through that effort, so I pretty much just sharpened it, and off my last stone, I could not get a sharp edge at all, and I just stropped it a ton on my 1 micron basswood strop, that's gunny juice on there, and just stropped it a bunch. I mean, it was a night and day difference between the edge, and that just shows me that there was a stubborn burr on there that I had to get off with the strop. So that leads me to believe that this steel is soft. Now I will admit that I did not really see very much edge deformation when I was using this knife. And I maybe felt a little bit of like hiccups in the edge when after a bunch of use, but it wasn't really that bad. But I will say that the steel feels soft, and that is something that's not good. It's just in a world of 20 CV and M390s, there are way too many soft 20 CVs out there, and honestly, I'd rather have a budget steel with a good heat treat just because it makes it much easier to sharpen. Because if this steel, I'm not really eager to get some use on this knife because I know that probably after I use it for a couple days, I'm not just going to be able to, I might be able to strop it back a little bit, but I'm probably going to have to sharpen it again and go through the whole process. It's going to be annoying and take a while. And I know I sound like I'm just whining here, but I feel like with, I feel like companies either need to make their knives in 20 CV, or no, they either need to have a good heat treat with their 20 CV, really nail that heat treat down, or just not use it at all. And so for that reason, I'd honestly rather have the S35VN on this with just a solid heat treat on it, if you know what I'm saying. I hope that this was either maybe just my knife, which I doubt it, just because I honestly don't know anything about heat treating, but it seems like 20 CV is just a hard steel to heat treat, and it seems like companies who really pay attention to the details can't always get it right. And also, it seems like custom makers are the only ones like who can consistently get good heat treatment with their 20 CV. So with that said, that is a pretty large negative with this knife. Anything else to talk about with the blade? Let's talk about the tip and just the blade shape of this. So it's a simple drop point blade shape. I actually like it. I think it works fine. I usually like a lower tip for my EDC knives, kind of like you see on the Mannix. I'm a big fan of this type of blade shape. But this honestly works fine for me. I have no complaints with it. With this knife thickening up at the tip, I'm not the biggest fan of that. I don't think this knife is trying to be some hard use pry bar. I honestly think that it could be, probably because it is so thick at the tip and it thickens up pretty quick. But still, I don't think that's what they're going for. So, and I don't expect knives to be as thin at the tip as they are down there, just because that seems pretty difficult because you don't have very much room to grind here. But when it goes from like 14, 15 thousandths behind the edge to almost 30 thousandths up here, I would like to see that a little bit less dramatic, kind of like your Sabenza. They would go from like the drop point Sabenza goes from like 19 thousandths to like 25 thousandths. That is bearable, but when sharpening this, it seems like I'm really raising my wrist up, and I just feel like in this section my angle is kind of off because I'm either raising my wrist up too early or too late, and it just gets a little bit annoying to have to focus and try and deal with. So yeah, I wish it wasn't that thick at the tip. But overall, as a conclusion to the blade, I know I've said a lot and I've gone on and on about this. I really am a fan of this grind. But the heat treat of this, I'm not really a big fan of. Honestly, with the grind this thin, that is really saving this blade for me and really saving the knife as a whole. Because if it was like this ProTech with like 25 thousandths behind the edge and it had this kind of bad heat treat, that would pretty much ruin it for me. But the thin grind does help. I do enjoy using this knife, and so I don't need it to be razor sharp to get through my uses. So that is good. But I really wish I really wish they would either switch to a different steel or get their 20 CV heat treat dialed in. But also, they have such good value on this knife. If they spend the time and effort it takes to get that heat treat dialed in, especially since I think they're upping the production count, or like the production on these knives, that's going to make that price go up. That's going to make it take longer for these knives to get out, and these knives are really in demand right now. So I just feel like I don't know. I just feel like maybe a different steel is the way to go. But they just switched to this, so I bet they just bought a ton of it, and so they're probably going to use it up. So I don't really know what I'm saying here, but yeah, that's all I got to say for the blade. Let's talk about the fit and finish and the lockup on this guy. So fit and finish. The fitment of this is pretty good. As you can see, this blade is off-center to the left, and I actually think that this is an off-center grind. So if you look at it, just look above my thumb right here, that blade looks perfectly centered in the handle there, but then when it tapers down, it goes off to the left, and I've kind of fixed it with my sharpening. I've evened out this bevel, but I can really notice when doing this, I really raise up going this way at the tip, but when I go this way, it's almost like I'm the same angle as I am on this side throughout the entire length of the blade. So I just think it's kind of thick on this side, and that's why you see it there with that off-center grind. No blade play on this guy. I did have some issues with the pivot backing out, but I just kind of Loctited it, let it sit for a couple days, and I was good. I had to do that a couple times. I don't know, maybe I didn't put enough Loctite on the knife, but I got it fixed now, so I'm fine with that. And one positive on this that I want to point out is they did an excellent job with the finishing on this micarta handle. They really knocked it out of the park with this. It's pretty much perfect in my opinion. So you have a slight contour here that aids in ergonomics, which is nice. And all of these edges are very nicely knocked down with a nice chamfer, wide enough, or it's not too small of a chamfer. It's not like they just broke the corner. They took the time to do a whole chamfer through that. And also, it is chamfered on the inside of this micarta. If you guys have ever had a knife that isn't knocked down on the inside, some of your FRN Spydercos have this issue. It's almost like the fat, like the extra fat on your fingers gets inside there and it gets pinched and it's not very comfortable. So they did a good job with that. This little thin part of the scale that they have to have a liner lock, that is very nicely knocked down on all sides. Usually that becomes an issue, but not on this one. So overall, very good fit and finish on this knife. I'm a really big fan of it. Or I mean, very good finishing on the micarta, so that is really nice. One issue that I noticed is there is a little bit of up and down play. I don't know if you can hear this, but it's very, very small amount. Like my ProTech Malibu has more. And on this review, I was like, well, it's not failing, so I don't really mind. So I guess I have to stick with that philosophy for this one. Since it's not failing, I don't really care. But I was curious because I was like, okay, what is happening with this that would make it have that little bit of up and down play? And because usually knives with a little bit of up and down play, I'll be able to push the lock bar over very easily because there's not enough lock bar pressure to make full engagement with that locking mechanism. And so usually that can be solved by taking the knife apart and just bending the lock bar over. But I noticed that this one has a very like crisp, I guess, clean lockup where I can't push it over at all. As you can see, that is not moving. I can just maybe do it a tiny bit where I can hear a tiny little bit of stick to it. Just a little bit. So I can barely push that lock over. So this up and down blade play, I don't think it's because of that. I think it's because they have internal stop pins on this, and if the channel that the internal stop pin takes is not properly milled, that you might not get that secure of a lockup with the stop pin meeting where that pocket is milled. It's kind of hard to describe without taking it apart, but if you have seen an internal stop pin, like the system of it, I think that the reason that this has that little bit of up and down play is because the internals of it isn't not properly milled. I don't want to say that, but just isn't perfectly milled. I'll say that. And so you just get a tiny bit of up and down, but it's not failing, so it doesn't really bother me. Just wanted to bring it to your guys' attention. And is that all I got to say for fit and finish? Yeah, I think that's it. Or the lockup, it's a steel lock bar. I want to mention that. So it's bronze because he heats it up. I really like that. I think that stainless steel is just a strong material, and titanium is good when it's carburized. And he said he was using titanium liners, but he kept having to carburize them or carbonize them. I have no clue. Always mix that up. That's got to be a thing on this channel now. Just me always mixing up carburized and carbonized. But so he heats up this steel lock bar and it gives it that bronze look. Gives it a more secure, strong lockup. I really like that. Just a little attention to detail things. You could just get by with a regular steel liner lock, but I think it's cool that he added that little touch there. Let's talk about the ergonomics of this. So the ergonomics, like I said, the micarta is very nicely knocked down, has a good texture to it. Like you can hear that, but it's not like super aggressive. So it's that perfect mixture of giving you good grip without being too slick. Also barely any jimping, which I like. There is some milling on this backspacer, which I think looks good, but I mean, you can't feel it in the hand. So yeah, overall really good ergonomics for the finishing of it. There are some little things that I'd just like to add. One, as you see, the high spot of the knife is back here, and then it tapers down when it goes up the handle. And what that does is when you're using it, the pressure of the cut is obviously pulling the knife back in the blade while you're pushing down. And so what that does is, like, this area here, since it's lower, it will target a specific spot in your hand, usually like about that much of area. And so if you're doing some strong cuts, one thing I've noticed is that is a little bit painful for me. That is the case with a lot of knives, but maybe in the future I would like to see a model from them which is kind of a straight back on here, I think that that would be a nice touch and just really help in ergos. That's what knives like this Savenza does, and that just evens out the pressure of the cut throughout your hand. So I wish they did that, but it's like a lot of companies don't do that, so I don't really blame them for it. And it's super good in this pinch grip. One of the most comfortable knives I own for this grip. This small choil here really gives you some room for it. Just I put my thumb on the pivot and then wrap my finger like that, and I can do a whole lot of stuff with this cut. I can cut towards me, cut away from me, cut on top, and then I can cut I can really cut at any angle with this grip, and I use it a whole lot. So really comfortable on this knife for me. Just wish that they kind of had a flat back here with this knife. One little thing that I get, one suggestion that I'm going to recommend, which a lot of people will probably roll their eyes at me for, is I would like to see a model from this with a thumb stud deployment instead of a flipper tab. If you guys, I don't know if I've already mentioned this in this video or not, but in the comment on my first impressions, they said that this is going to be the last version of this knife. There isn't going to be a version 7 of the Model 1. And so I'm at this point, I'm not really making recommendations on this knife, really just knives in the future, just kind of design inputs that I would think would be cool to see. So yeah, I'd like to see a straight back spine on the handle, and then maybe a flipper delete with a thumb stud, because this would really help in ergos. These knives that are flippers with a finger choil and that flipper tab is in the middle right here, what it does is when you're pushing down on this knife, it's coming back, and then that flipper tab is digging into your pointer finger, which this one is very nicely knocked down, so I don't really have that much of an issue with it. They kind of did the best with what they had, but still, I would like to see a thumb stud version, and I just like thumb studs better than flipper tabs. A lot of people probably don't get it, but it's just in ergonomics usually. Like, imagine if this flipper tab wasn't here, you could put your pointer finger right here. You could really just be creative and a whole lot more grips with this knife. And so just a suggestion off the top of my head. Let's talk about carry for this. So the carry on this knife is good. This pocket clip, I think, has been kind of the downfall of this knife. Not downfall, but a lot of the negatives that they've had in the past is due to this pocket clip. Sometimes the pocket clip stands up and doesn't make full contact or isn't touching the micarta scale. Sometimes the retention is overly tight, but this one, they nailed it. It's perfect. It just did a really good job. Super good retention. I can slide this in and out of my pocket without a second hand, so I can just go like that. It's not like I have to hold the pocket and then slide it in. Carries deep for those people who are curious about that. Looks really classy with this titanium milled clip. Honestly, I don't get the titanium milled clips. I don't see what's wrong with just a standard bent clip. One thing they do aid in is ergonomics. They're really good for that. But the weight on this guy is solid, under 4 ounces. I'm really happy with that. Overall, very nice knife to carry, super easy, no complaints with that in that aspect. The action on this knife is also good. If you are a fidgeter, this knife is fun to play with. It's not super drop shutty like you'd see on like a knife like this. But I don't really care about that. It still has a good detent, fires out nice and hard, reliable opening, and easy to close. So yeah, overall action is good for me. And also this runs on bearings, so I prefer washers. Just kind of bearings gunk up easier, but really I don't have any issues with that. My thoughts on pivot systems is I don't care what this knife runs on. I feel like that's just one of those things in the knife world where people try and argue about it. They say, oh, hard uses washers, like just fidgeters is for or bearings are for fidgeters, but I think that bearings work fine in hard use, and really I don't have any issues with them. Now let's talk about the value for this. So I think the value, it's there. It's one of the best values out on the market, especially because it's a small business. It's all CNC made. A bunch of custom makers, if they were doing this, would consider it a mid-tech. I think that term is very loose, so I kind of use it loosely, I guess I would say. But yeah, I really like that. I like that it's made in America. I think that is really cool. And I pretty much like it. I'm really liking everything about this knife, except it has that kind of weak heat treat on there. I hope they get that fixed, or maybe they just use a different steel. It also has kind of, what was I going to say? It has that little bit of lock rock, which isn't that big of a deal because it's not failing, and I said it's probably something to do with the internal stop pins. Also, the ergos could be a little bit better, but they are good to begin with. And oh, one more thing, the pocket clip kind of goes like shifts around like that, which I'm not a fan of, but it doesn't really bother me all that much. It doesn't really shift unless I'm purposely trying to make it shift. I've tried Loctiting this screw, but it hasn't really helped out. But yeah, that's all I got for today. Overall value, I would highly suggest this. My main issue is just the heat treat on that 20 CV. I hope this gets addressed in the future. But I really am a fan of how thin this knife is ground, and I'm excited to see what this company has to come in the future. So that is all I got today. Thank you guys for watching. Yep, sorry if this video was long, sorry if it was rambly. I'm just getting back. I took like a week break from YouTube videos, and I'm usually pretty good at just talking out of my head, but I kind of stumble a little bit over my words here. But yeah, that's all I got today. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.